the Parrot Stars podcast. My name is Alexis. I'm here again with Avery, and
Hello.
Today we have a very special guest for you all. We are joined by Mike Rodgers. He works at the Treasure Coast Wildlife Center in Palm City, Florida. And as we promised in the beginning of season 3, we are trying to connect all different areas of aviculture. So although our podcast is very parrot forward, Avery and I have always been very passionate about conservation in general. So this is an episode that's devoted to native wildlife, but I think based on our preliminary conversations here with Mike, we also have a little connection with Mike to parrots as well. But yeah, we're really excited to have Mike here on our podcast today. So we'll get started by asking some fun questions, get to know you a little bit, get to know the Treasure Coast Wildlife Center. Let's make sure I get the name right off the bat. All right. Perfect.
You got it. I'm glad to be here too.
Yes. Welcome. So
to begin with, I mean, we are in a different location.
Oh,
so,
yes. We should probably mention that because everyone's going to recognize that this is not my dining room.
Everybody who does watch the podcast will be, wow.
Although we still are doing our Parrot Stars podcast in a dining room.
That's true.
One day we'll break out of the dining room settings and we'll actually get out there and do something on site somewhere. But here we are.
For this exciting podcast, though, we are in the heart. Well, no, this isn't the heart of Florida. This is... As an Illinoisan, of course, it's always in the heart of Floridians. But as an Illinoisan, we are in Florida now for this special podcast.
I guess we should mention that to all of our listeners. So Avery and I flew down to Florida specifically for a couple of our podcast episodes. Yeah. So stay tuned as we continue our adventure through our Florida recordings. We are at our breeding program in Florida, and I don't know what order these episodes are going to drop in. So I've been learning I shouldn't tell people what order they're going to.
I know. We always try to refer to, and we're like, never mind, scratch that.
And then we're like, oh gosh, this one's going to drop before the last one. Okay, so part of the reason we're down here is because we want to have an episode devoted to our breeding program, give people a little insight to what we do and how that connects to Parrot Stars. But while we were here, we're like, okay, let's take advantage of the fact that we're in Florida where there's so many interesting people to talk to. And Mike, thank you for being so generous with your time and your willingness to participate with the podcast and let us learn a little bit all about the incredible work that you do and that the Wildlife Center does, because it's really important. I'm very, very excited for our listeners to hear about it. So
yeah, thank you for having me. I checked out the podcast, and it's pretty amazing. I'm loving all the information you guys give out to everybody. I wish there were more podcasts like that out there right now.
Maybe one day.
And I did notice it was a different dining room when I walked in here, and I was a little confused.
Oh yeah, there we go.
But it's a pretty dining room. It's a really nice space too. But
maybe
cozy.
When you come if you ever come to Chicago, you can visit Parrot Stars. We'll have you back on the podcast.
There you go.
And then you'll get to see my fancy tiny dining room.
Yes, I think it looks nice there too.
Yeah,
nicer than my dining room.
Exactly. All right, so let's get into it. Let's learn all about you and the Wildlife Center.
Sure.
Yeah, so I guess to begin with, I mean, before we can dive into your background, because we were talking a little bit, and you have a pretty awesome, diverse background.
Yeah.
I guess the whole point of this conservation conversation. I got it in there.
Got it.
I was really favorite phrase. Oh my gosh!
I tried to name one of the past episodes conservation conversation, and I was like,
it was a little
Alexis
a little mouthful.
It's hard to say
on that one.
I was surprised I could say it right then. Anyways, for this conservation episode, to begin with, kind of tell us a little bit about the actual Treasure Coast Wildlife Center, because that's really what it's all about, and that's where you currently are. So if you kind of want to give us a background before we jump into a bunch of other cool stuff.
Yeah, so Treasure Coast Wildlife Center is a wildlife rehab or wildlife hospital. We were called Treasure Coast Wildlife Hospital originally, and we kind of turned more into a center because we have we have tours coming through and a lot of other stuff going on, education. Right. But yeah, we are devoted to wildlife conservation and human education, and that's one of our. I don't know if it's on here, but it's our slogan. But yeah, we sit in Palm City on 293 acres of
Wow.
wilderness.
I didn't realize it was
I
that
did
big.
Yeah.
not realize it was
Yeah.
that big
Great.
either.
That's
When
huge.
you guys stopped by to see us out back, where there was kind of a big field and then woods out there,
Yeah.
it just keeps going and going and going.
That's
And it's
great.
great because
Wow.
it's mostly untouched. I
Oh.
say mostly because there are some of that land we actually use for release that has some enclosures and stuff, and we kind of slow release animals. But for the most part, it's just untouched wilderness, flat pine and swamp and, different wetlands and different environments out there. So it's
Wow.
great for us because when we do patch up some of these critters and get them back out to the wild, they go out there.
You walk out the
Um,
back door.
Yeah, I mean a little further,
Well,
like
right, yeah, but
sometimes way out there,
of
because we
course.
do have lots of hawks that love to live in
Yeah,
our area. So
definitely.
sometimes if you just
You
put an
can't.
animal out the back door, it's a free meal. But which is great for the hawks,
Yeah, we're talking about
But
wildlife here.
when
Yeah.
when you worked 2 weeks to rehab, a variole or something, and
Yeah.
you want to go a little
Mhm.
ways out there
Of
before you release them
course.
to the correct habitat. And,
Yeah.
some of the critters you need to make sure they're going out to where they have some friends and they can kind
Mhm.
of get a good start with their same species. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we've been in business 51 years.
Yes, I
Um,
saw that on the
great.
website.
yeah,
That's
Yeah.
a phenomenal amount
long
of time.
time. I've only
Happy.
been there about 2, but hopefully not dating myself by saying 51 years. We've been in business 51 years, but I haven't. We were over on Bridge Road in Hobe Sound, and then fairly. Actually, I don't remember exactly how far back, but a little while back, we ended up here on a much larger property, and
Wow.
Great.
it's a beautiful kind of setup there. So
It really is. It's
yeah,
it's really nice and secluded. It's kind of quiet back
yeah.
there. So there's not a lot of,
Especially in the
human.
evening when we
Right.
close up to guests and we close up. Sometimes it's just myself or me and one other person there finishing things up at the end of the day, and it all comes even more alive, and you hear all the sounds and everything.
Yeah.
It's amazing out there. So but yeah, and we take in actually I think we released over 3,000 animals last year,
Wow.
and
Fantastic.
it's just
Yeah.
the 9 of us. Only really 4 of us or three of us are rehabbers there, and everybody kind of does a little bit of everything there. So
Yeah.
everybody's kind of dealing with husbandry and
That's great.
such. But yeah, it's a lot.
3,000.
But not
Wow.
only that, you guys are a not for profit, so you also have that whole component
Mm-hmm.
too. That's a small team to be managing what I would imagine is
A
a
lot.
full force effort to try to raise funds and to keep the center alive and going and
Yeah.
continue with projects. So
51 years in, and we're still very grassroots.
yeah.
We're trying to, expand financially and such, but yeah, we're still very grassroots, and a lot of donation funding and
Yeah.
trying to get grants and stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're small, but we're huge at the same time. So
3,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot of good stuff. I mean, speaking of that and all the like surrenders, there's quite a few animals that are actually on site that people can visit. If you want to kind of tell us a little bit about those, what people can expect.
those are my coworkers. So
I guess
we,
we say this.
The ones that
we
you're
say the same
always
thing.
so happy to see.
I love them. Actually, I'm happy to see any animal that comes through that door. I'm excited to
Right.
see.
Yeah.
Not always excited to see the condition they come in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I know when I first started, we'd see animal control coming down the road, or a citizen coming down the road to turn over an animal that they found. And I'm like, yeah, what are they going to bring? This is, so excited to see what new, because there's so many different species coming through there. You just never know. And now it's like, oh no, there's another one coming in. Okay, let's
Yeah.
get set up. But yeah, but I love seeing all of them. But
Yeah.
the permanent residents, the ones you can come visit, those are all critters that couldn't be released, and it's primarily birds. We do have a lot of other creatures there, but it's primarily birds. So it's going to be animals that aren't going to make it on their own in the wild, but they're strong, they're healthy, they're just maybe
Mhm.
missing a wing or an eye, and can't really make a living on their own. So they get to kind of live on Easy Street a little bit. They do work with me, so a lot of these animals go out to outreach programs and
Mhm.
events and such. So that's why I call them my coworkers, and they all
Yeah.
have their own personalities. But
Mhm.
you
Oh,
can
yeah.
come visit them when you get there. Thursdays through Sunday, 11 to 3. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I was really excited. I was telling Avery that like the way that my trips usually fall when I come here is I'm usually here Sunday to Thursday. And so I literally miss the opportunity to get over there.
Of
So I was
course.
so excited
Yeah.
because I'm at the mercy of the airlines. So the first direct flight that got us here on Sunday, like the whole time we were flying, I'm like, we're gonna have time to get to the wildlife center. I'm like, this has been a goal of mine every trip.
Really?
And
And
I
you
just
just never
it never
make it.
ends up landing on the day that I can
You
actually
guys
get
can
over
come
there.
out whenever. It's
Okay,
okay.
thank you. That's very
I'm
generous
not gonna
of
kick
you.
you off Saturday. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. But yeah, it was super impressive when we walked in. So yeah, when you walk in, the front of the facility is kind of your hybrid. You have where the like animal control or citizens who have found animals can drop off right directly to the hospital or the
Yeah.
intake area.
Mhm.
But then over to the left, you have your kind of walkway around all of the residents and those animals and those habitats that you have created for them.
Yeah.
And it was really fascinating to see. And it's really cool that you get to experience the wildlife up close and
Very
personal.
close. Closer than like at a
Yes.
zoo or something like that. I
Definitely.
guess we're kind of a zoo in that sense when you come to visit those animals, but way closer than if you were at, a
Yeah. And
normal
I would
zoo.
imagine, I mean, I would imagine that people that visit the center that this might be their first encounter with
Yep.
that species of wild animal that close. Maybe they've seen it flying overhead. Maybe, yes, they've seen it in a zoo setting where there's a lot of space between them. But I'd imagine that's got to have a huge wow factor when people come through for the first time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's great too because we are so small in a way that I'm in a small team and everything that when guests come in, we're not right now at least overwhelmed with guests coming in, but we do get a lot. And when they come in, we're cleaning and feeding and taking in patients, and I might have to run and go work on a patient or figure out what's going on with something that came in. But for the most part, we tend to spend a lot of time with the guests that do come in, so we
Oh,
can
Yeah.
really give them
Great.
more in-depth talks and answer questions and the kind of stuff that you don't normally get when you go to a usual
That's a part of the
rehab
education,
or
though.
zoo.
Like, the guests need to know,
yeah.
that
Yeah,
like it's not just you know what I'm saying. It's
It's
not just walking around. Like you got to go
you
like
gotta
help these
understand.
wildlife. Like
Yeah.
this is the whole. Guess what I'm trying to say is this is the whole aspect of the whole rehab and an actual wildlife center,
yeah.
not a zoo. Which I think
Yeah, we can talk a
people,
lot more
yeah,
about what actually happens, why they came into us,
Hmm.
what people can do when they find said animals. And sometimes it's a lot of animals come into us just mistaken identity. We'll get a little screech owl in, and screech owls have the plumicorns, the little feather tufts,
yeah,
and they look just like. A mini or a baby version of a great horned owl,
yeah,
which we also have here. And so people are like, I found this little baby and there was no mama and he was just sitting in a bush looking at me. And I'm like, he was probably about to take a nap. You can go put him back
Oh no.
and everything.
Gosh.
So, but we can kind of get ahead of that stuff and
Yeah.
people and they find it funny and stuff, but they also kind of learn and they tell their friends and stuff.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
A great
yeah.
way, like word of mouth. But I saw that you also take the education animals to different places and
Mhm.
use the education animals to introduce people up close and personal, not just at your facility, but remotely as well.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience is like and kind of what events you typically do?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do, and I'm getting more and more involved in that side of it. But yeah, they go out to all kinds of events. So there's a lot of outreach things where we go to schools, nursing homes, all over the
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
But also they'll go to places like the air show and the arts festival. It was kind of funny the air show because they're birds, but yeah, and they're pretty well acclimated to groups of people
Yep.
and crowds of people and sounds and sights. So they're kind of used to, like I said, they're my coworkers. They're pretty professional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's great because you're talking to children, you're talking to their grandparents, and they all have amazing questions and interesting questions. And I love the education aspect of it because I like to go a little bit deeper and a little bit further than what people usually learn in school or what you
Mhm.
hear when you go to a zoo or something like that,
Yeah. I mean,
and kind of tell them something that blows their mind. Like
Yeah.
recently I've been on a kick talking about the respiratory systems of birds and how pelicans use that weird one-way respiratory system with air sacs to their advantage for hunting food and,
Yeah.
using it as an airbag when they smack into water and stuff. And when I go
Well,
a
why
little
don't you?
deeper,
I don't want to interrupt you, but
yeah.
our listeners would probably love to hear that story. So
Yeah,
if you
talk
want,
about it,
yeah,
man.
if you don't mind sharing that kind of that cool
Um,
fact that you explained to people, because I think our
yeah.
listeners might, because again, it's kind of parrot forward, they might love to hear something
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so birds have crazy. I mean, it blew my mind when I learned about it, and every time I think about it, it blows my mind again. But birds have very weird respiratory systems, and so do crocodilians. So I like to link them
Yeah.
Mhm.
together because they have a very similar system. But birds, they have a one-way respiratory system. So we have blind sac lungs, lungs that open up
Mhm.
when our diaphragm comes down, and then as the diaphragm goes up, they squish down, and we expel that oxygen or that air, and we can maybe pull 50% of the oxygen out of the air. And birds need a whole lot more oxygen to do their job, to
Mhm.
fly, to get those muscles moving. And they also can't really, I mean, they're using those muscles to pump air through, so they can't really, while they're flapping their wings, breathe. They have just the craziest respiratory system.
yeah.
I'm preaching to the choir with you guys, I'm sure, but where they bring in air and it goes through a system of sacs in the back of their body, where they're not lungs, it's just air sacs. And then as they're pulling in more air, that air is then funneling through in one side of their lungs and out the other side. And you could go really deep into it and the chemical reason why they're able to do this, but they're able to pull almost 100% of the oxygen out of the air,
Incredible.
which is just insane. And then that air goes to a system of sacs in the front of their body, their chest kind of area. And then as they're pulling in more air, they're breathing out the other air.
Yeah.
And it's just insane. So with pelicans, I love to talk to people. Hey, do you know how pelicans are able to catch their food? And everyone goes, oh, they dive into the water. And like, it kind of looks like that, and they kind of do, but they're actually smacking the water with their chest and their throat and everything. They're smacking into the water. It's like a car crash. And so they see fish down below, they smack into the water using that big air sac on the front of them, kind of as an airbag in your car.
Wow.
And it stuns the fish, and then you see them sitting there scooping up their fish, while the fish are like, whoa, what just happened? And that's one thing I love to talk about.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, the videos you've seen, it looks like somebody doing a cannonball.
Yes.
Like it's
It is incredible. So, okay, really quick. I swear to God, this is a quick sidebar. So I got to see it. I was in Costa Rica, and this is like kind of a touristy spot where we were. So I would assume that the pelicans are relatively desensitized to humans being out in the water, and they would be circling above, and they would come hit the water like so close to you. And I was like, this is absolutely insane. And it was like a little bit nerve-wracking because
Yeah, I
they're
know.
just plummeting through the air. It was really,
Yeah,
really
like, oh
fascinating.
God,
and
are they
until
okay?
you're up close, like again, even just walking to the wildlife center, because you see them flying around here in Florida periodically.
Yeah.
But then when you're like 5 feet away from them, you're like, gosh, that is a huge animal.
They are very
Yeah.
big. And when you see the white, we have a white pelican and brown
Yeah.
pelicans. When you see the
Humongous.
white pelican,
Huge.
they're incredible. Yeah, they're massive. She's only 3, turning 4-ish. Her hatch day, I'm sure, is coming up, but about 4 years old, and she's just ginormous.
I know.
It's amazing.
They're awesome. Something
Yeah.
people don't, and especially with your situation at like Treasure Coast is because the enclosures you can get so close. I mean, it's something that people can really appreciate, like
Yeah.
with the wildlife center, aside from like a zoo, because zoos a lot of times like there's a pelican over there.
There's a
And
pelican out on that pedestal in the
looks
water in
great.
our little
I mean,
enclosure.
but
Yeah.
that's something that I appreciate when walking around the actual center. So that's really cool. They're awesome animals.
They are awesome, and they're great at catch. If you ever want to play, I'm not super into baseball, but if you're into baseball,
Really?
you want them as your outfielders. Yeah.
No way.
Sometimes they can't do it, and I can't promise if people come out that they can do it. They can only eat so much, and they can
Right,
kind
right.
of get overwhelmed. But sometimes I'll bring guests in, or like some of my family and stuff, in to toss some of the thread herring and finger mullet and stuff to them, and they catch them. You can toss it way out there, and they'll catch it.
Well, that's
no
a big
problem.
ball mitt. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what?
they got a big
Yeah,
like,
big mitt. Yeah, that Gila
big
pouch
one.
is huge. Their mouths. I got a slow motion video of one opening
Oh,
up as a fish was
that's
going in,
awesome.
and it was kind of amazing and terrifying when you see it in slow motion. It
Yep.
looks like something from a horror film opening up, but it was really cool. But yeah, that's
Oh,
awesome.
that's amazing.
So I guess aside from the residents,
Mhm.
because obviously the main activity or what the
Mission.
mission,
Yeah.
yes, thank you, of what the Wildlife Center does is the rehab and the release. And so if
Yes.
you kind of want to dive in, I was kind of curious myself, some recent exciting actual stories like rehab release stories that
Yeah.
if you want to share.
Yeah. So we're actually getting into baby season
Mhm.
here, baby bird season specifically, but all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And for a few months, it's going to be, we're kind of just starting it and it's going to be crazy on our end. So we get a lot of impressive kind of stories I could talk about. We're in eagle season right now, where the eagles are all nesting here, and
Mhm.
Florida, I believe, just became the second largest population. So it's Alaska and then
Wow.
Florida.
Fantastic.
You can
Yeah.
fact check me on that, but I think the last time I looked, we surpassed whoever else it was, maybe Washington State or something, and we're now, I mean, we're loaded with eagles, and they're really
Wow.
coming back and thriving. But
That's awesome.
we've gotten quite a few eagles in, and they're fighting in the area. Sometimes you'll see them fighting over territory and nests and stuff. So we'll get like big injuries. They'll come in with broken wings. They've fallen and broken legs and stuff. But sometimes we'll get one like these two got into a little battle, and one came to us with a broken toe. And
Mhm.
so it was a quick, easy kind of, let it heal and, make sure that he can fly and he can, do what he needs to do and then release. And the turnaround was fairly quick. But it's just impressive to kind of watch, I believe my clinical director did it, but watch them be released and just take off. There's
Yeah.
such a
Oh my
big,
gosh.
impressive
I
bird.
know.
But yeah, baby season is what it's all about right now for us. So hundreds, literally hundreds upon hundreds of birds come in over those months, and they need to be fed every so
Yes.
often. Some depending on species, it could be every hour, and sometimes it's every half hour, and so on and so forth. And we're tongue feeding them. We're mama
Yep.
for them for a while, and so we're taking them home and feeding them into the evening, then
Yep.
bringing them back, and because they have to keep going.
Yep.
Gives you a great appreciation for what the moms have to go through. I got 3 kids of my
Yeah.
own, and I get it, but this is, I mean, they don't ever stop eating, but this is extreme. So
I
yeah.
know, it's incredible. I
Yeah.
did a very short like internship stint at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center that's up by us in DuPage County.
Okay.
And it was really cool. They had us on kind of rotations. You got to do mammals and then you got to do birds and then you got to do like the residents. And when you saw the girls, because the only the staff was able to do the actual feeding of the baby animals, the interns got to clean.
That's usually the way it is. That's the way it is
Which
here
is
too.
fine. I could totally,
Yeah.
it was good. I paid my dues. But yeah, it was exactly that. By the time she made it through her babies,
Yeah.
she started over again at the beginning.
Yep.
And they worked in 2-hour shifts. And because for that 2 straight hours, there was no stopping. By the time she
Yep.
made it through every single mouth, she was starting again at the beginning. And it was something that I had never thought about. It was something that
Yeah.
had never been something that has never been in front of me. And then when you see it up close and personal, it does give you a total different
Yeah.
appreciation for wildlife rehab and how much effort goes into each individual animal.
Yeah.
And then you times that by 3,000 in a year.
I know.
It's
It's
crazy.
incredible.
That's
Yeah.
another thing. I mean, you're doing this amazing work and it's really awesome. The end result, people from the outside are like, wow, that's really cool. But there's like an emotional attachment, you know?
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that
It's
sometimes?
yeah. It's hard to not get attached. You
Yeah.
kind of, they're gonna come in either injured or babies, and
Yeah.
they're gonna either, so a small percentage isn't gonna make it depending on their injuries. So there's that. You're gonna have to
Yeah.
cope with that. And then there's a lot that, thankfully most of them do. And then you got to release them, and you're like,
know.
oh, I just took
Yeah.
care of you for months, and upwards of months sometimes, and there
I
you go.
know.
But it's a good feeling. So I worked at the Palm Beach Zoo for a while, and that was amazing. And to work, with the human animals and the exotic animals. But as soon as I started here, we get a lot of poisoned hawks, a lot of poisoned birds of prey in general, but a lot of red shoulders were coming in. My first year was a ton of red shoulders specifically, and my first one that I was able to get back to health. And within a couple of days, he was attacking me through the bars, like, let me out. And the bars, the mesh. And to be able to just let him go
Yeah.
and fly away. It sounds sappy and cheesy and everything, but out of all the work I've done, that gave me goosebumps, and
Yeah.
I like fell in love with it immediately. And this is for me. This is my new career life,
I
my
know
life. Yeah.
yeah, it's
So
awesome.
Yeah, you do get a intense appreciation for how much work the animals do in order to survive.
yeah,
Yeah.
And
those moms are busy.
and you can see,
and
I would
dads.
assume, I mean, you can maybe elaborate a little bit more, but you see, I would assume pretty severe cases come in, and the fight within them to come out the other side healthy is just remarkable. How they can
Yeah.
fight infections and injuries and pain, and then
Yeah.
their will to survive is so strong. And I
Yeah.
think we kind of forget that sometimes as humans, that like we have our own will to survive, but each animal is fighting so hard. And
Yeah.
it's real, like, I'm just always so grateful that there's humans like you and centers like this that are willing to help them, because they, without our interference, are fighting so much. But a lot of it, unfortunately, is coming from human interaction. And
Yeah, it's a lot of human related situations, but the kind of uh overwhelming support and love that comes in from the people bringing these animals in, calling us, what do I do?
oh
I can't get
yeah,
this animal, but it looks like this is going on. They're sending me, text messages with videos and photos. Is this okay? And all this stuff. But there's a lot. It's easy. I guess it could be easy in this kind of industry, if you will, to be like, oh, the human, us humans are destroying everything with this,
hmm
but then when you see the other side of it is like, people really do care. It just seems like they don't understand how what they do is affecting the wildlife. And then that's where it comes in, that kind of human discovery side of our motto is, educating these people. Cause it's really easy when I first started to be like, oh man, why did this person do this? Like,
yeah,
they should know better than them. Thinking about it, and I'm like, you know what? They should know better, and it's our job to teach them. How would they know better without
yeah,
us? So, I mean, I didn't know any of this stuff before I got into this world. So, yeah, it's there's most, I would say most of what comes in is because of kind of human interaction or human related injuries and human related issues, but there's a lot of concern and compassion out there
oh,
from the general public too. So
Yeah.
there's some
Definitely.
really, really compassionate people that they go through crazy situations to try and help these animals. And, they might
yeah,
not be able to get them to us real quick because of their situation or where they are and such, but they go through all kinds of crazy
Yeah.
situations just to get these animals to
yeah.
us. So
Now, do you serve just Martin County, or do you have animals coming in from all
they come
over
in
West
from
Palm area, like greater West Palm
Yeah, we
area?
get them from all over the place, from Indian River County and Palm Beach County and all over the place. And there's some that aren't supposed to really, you can't really bring them across county lines and stuff. But then there's that animal control, animal care and control that will, something happens in Palm Beach
Communicate.
County and they
Hmm.
want to get it to us versus maybe another wildlife center or something. Um, our animal control here in Martin County will go and meet them at the line and
Oh,
all
Oh,
kinds of cool stuff
nice.
like that for situations. And there's
that's
some
neat.
animals you can't really do that with, but yeah, we get. I mean, and the people that just the citizens out there that just find these animals and bring them to us come from all over the place.
Yeah.
They don't know about
Wow.
county lines and they don't really care, and I'm glad they don't because we can
Yeah, help
take
the
care of them.
animal.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Right.
so it's pretty cool. But they come from all over the place.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Would you say, I mean, your time being there, is there a most common, I guess, most common species or most common incident that people can kind of be aware of out there?
Yeah, three things. I would say three things. Baby birds in general, lots of mockingbirds and grackles. That's a common thing. And this season, I keep harping on it because we're going into it, and
Yep.
it becomes our entire life for a few months. But also a lot of poisoning of multiple, especially bird species out there. Everything from all the raptors
Yeah.
um, bioaccumulating rat poison and other stuff like that. Because it's not just them catching rats. Um, but all kinds of rodents and other critters out there are eating the rat
Yep.
poison,
People don't
and
think
they're
about
catching
that.
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, most raptors are very opportunistic, but everything's eating this stuff.
Yep.
And then things like we're talking about pelicans, a lot of runoff is causing poisoning, which is you might not see. When you think of pelicans, you think of hooks, people leaving their hooks out there, and that's a huge problem. Lines and hooks getting
Yeah.
caught in their gular pouches, and their wings, and everything.
Yeah, it's heavy
But
fishing culture here too. So it's something, and by us too, because we're in the Great Lakes. So it's something that people should definitely pay attention to if you're even
yeah,
even if you frequent a lake or you walk the forest preserve or wherever you are, always be on the lookout for that stuff because you picking up that whatever gets left behind might literally save a life
yeah.
Yeah.
and being real
And
proactive.
not cleaning your fish and then throwing the bones and what's left or the head to the
Yeah.
pelicans. People think they're helping the pelicans, and the pelicans become feathered dogs, basically. That stuff gets
Oh,
stuck in them, gets stuck in their intestinal system,
Yeah.
sometimes pokes through their gular pouches, those little pouches under their beaks,
Yeah.
and causes severe issues and can kill them. And we see a lot of that. But the other side of it that you don't really see, but it's just, their population gets affected because of runoff. So
Yeah.
people
mhm.
spraying insecticide, pesticides, and all kinds of stuff
Yep.
out on their lawns. That ends up in, we're all canals around here. South Florida is all canal
Yeah.
based, especially out here where there's, farms and stuff. But that gets into the canals and then, and into the ocean and stuff. And yeah, you have pelicans that are eating fish that have eaten microorganisms that have all of these poisons in them, and it bioaccumulates. So now you have
Mhm.
pelicans who can't metabolize calcium, and their eggs come out like jelly, and they can't reproduce.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things you don't even think about, like, oh, spraying my lawn isn't going to affect the pelicans out at the ocean.
It's all
It is. You're
connected.
just not
Yeah.
seeing
Yeah.
it. You see pelicans out there, but there's less because of that.
Yeah.
The other thing is a lot of vehicle strikes. I would say most of the birds I get and lots of other critters like the gopher tortoises are all vehicle strikes.
And those
pretty much.
are endangered right now, right? The
Yeah,
gopher,
they're very
protected.
threatened and they're protected, and they're keystone species, which you
Yeah.
hear that term keystone species everywhere, and it's kind of a cliche thing to talk about in this industry, but it really matters because they build dens that everything else out there uses for a
Yeah.
million different reasons. We always talk about the wildfires that are actually really important for us to have here for the wildlife out here. But they build dens that lots of different species will go and hide in from the wildfires and from the smoke,
Wow.
but also from everything else. There's lots of species that use them to breed, to mate. There's lots of species that lay their eggs or put their babies in these dens that wouldn't be able to build a really decent den and
Right.
protect their babies. And we have lots of gopher tortoise dens and gopher holes out back in that 293 acres behind our
Wow.
rehab. And I actually put a camera, a trail camera, across from one, and just got footage just in 2 days of the different animals that were going and using that den. And
Gives
it's
me
an active
goosebumps.
gopher tortoise den with the gopher tortoise using it, but he's hanging out in there with rattlesnakes that are not
Right.
hurting him. There was a bunny in there. There was actually a sandhill crane was digging in the mound in front of it that's kind of created by them digging out. There were armadillos. There were possums. All kinds of critters using this. And I can only imagine what else I'm going to find because I've left it out there for a while now. So I'm curious to see
Oh
what's
my gosh.
what's
That's
on that.
awesome.
Yeah, but But yeah, it's all vehicle strikes with them. They cross the roads. There's a lot of roads now, and there's a lot of fragmentation of their kind of habitat, and they get struck. And
Yeah.
they're little tanks. They're amazing survivors. What I've seen them get through, that just looks like there's no way they could survive it, and they do, but not always. But there's a lot of them. I think we have 8 inside our animal hospital at either 7 or 8 at the current time. No, 8 because I just got
Oh,
one in
wow.
yesterday. Yeah, and they take a long time to heal. When they heal, they do everything slow. They're tortoises,
Yeah.
slow metabolism. So yeah, you give them medicine. It takes a long time for them to use that medicine within their body.
Mhm.
So there's a lot.
Yeah. I'm of the mindset we're all obviously passionate about, but just to emphasize the point of like keystone species. So I'm of the mindset that basically everything that exists is a keystone species in some way.
Yeah.
However, but it's important for to really nail it home, like what little thing you do, like as a human, like at your home,
Mhm.
can really have a huge, like a huge effect.
Huge
And I
impact.
think
Yeah.
we might even need to define it for some of our listeners. So a
Oh
keystone
yeah.
species is a species that is involved in an ecosystem that if it is removed from that ecosystem, other parts of the ecosystem start to collapse. So like you're saying,
Mm.
this is a species that if it is removed or decreased to an unsustainable number, all other species are going to be impacted. And it sometimes isn't necessarily just isolated to animal species. It can affect plant species.
Oh
It can
yeah.
Yeah.
affect the
Entire.
Yep.
entire
Yeah.
ecosystem. So it's something that, yes, we're going to be really motivated to protect those keystone species. But like you're saying, every
Yeah.
animal plays a role, and
Yep.
I mean, this is millions of years of evolution,
Yep.
and there's always some
Yeah.
sort of equilibrium happening out there. So when we go heavy in one direction with animals taking over an area, or the
Yep.
more unfortunate being eliminated from an area, it's going to have really, really catastrophic effects down the road.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
just
Keystone is literally the block at the top of an arch. And to your point, every single one of those blocks all the way down the arch
yeah.
is important for the rest of them.
Yeah.
If you take any of those out once the arch is created, it's going to come down. But yeah, the keystone is
Definitely.
that species. Like gopher tortoises, literally over 350 species use those gopher tortoise holes,
Yeah.
Incredible.
and probably more that we don't know about.
Yeah.
So
And that's
Definitely.
something new I'm learning just from talking to you. I never knew. I mean,
Yeah.
I saw it on your site that that's a species that you're very focused on, and it's something that you are actively trying to create awareness around.
mhm.
But I've never encountered that information, and you don't know until you know.
So that's, you were asking about interesting rehab situations, and
Yeah.
so we had 2 gopher tortoise situations that stick in my head last year and this year. The one that's been on the news, if anybody locally has seen it, has been about a gopher tortoise that we had brought in. And it was completely painted with nail polish. Somebody's kid, it looks like, had painted, put their name on it, and drawn all pretty pictures on there. And they
Ugh.
just didn't get that that was, going to heavily affect this poor tortoise. And we it's almost completely gone, but it's been probably 2 months of us slowly trying to
Slowly,
get
yeah.
this acrylic nail polish off
Yeah.
without affecting the tortoise and without stressing it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
My
like
clinical director
yeah.
has been working diligently
Ugh.
on it, and she's gotten all but a little tiny bit off, but it's been a lot. And people, the kid's not going to realize that, she's just making it pretty, but she's not going to realize that the tortoise needs to be able to thermoregulate, and not being able to get that direct sunlight on and direct heat on the back, or maybe getting too much because it's holding in some of that heat.
Yeah.
Not being able to hide from predators because now it's a brightly painted tortoise. That's something that when it came in, I was blown away. I was like, oh no. But it's a good success story.
Yeah.
She's super healthy, and once this paint is gone, she's going to go back to her den. She needs to go back to where she was found, and hopefully, with all of the media that has been around it, the people have discovered it's probably not great to paint any more tortoises. And then the other one was people don't want them on their property because they dig under their foundations, and because they have, gopher dens, you can't really build. Unfortunately, for the people who bought those properties, they need that habitat, and we're putting our houses where they live already. So sometimes people take a look around left and right and see that no one's looking and pour concrete down those dens and try to build their foundation on top. And so we actually had one last year that came in covered in concrete.
Oh my.
The entire shell all the way up to their face and around their jaw. And it was very hard to get all of that off without, hurting the tortoise.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we've seen, and I know has been a story with other rehabs too.
Yeah.
People don't understand like the true importance of a shell. Like it's not just like hard protection.
Yeah.
Like it's an actual
The shell
chemical
is-
thing
Yes.
Yeah.
that
And they have
a lo-
nerves and
yes.
everything. They can feel a
so you
sensation.
can't just use
So-
nail polish remover to get the nail polish off.
Yes.
Right? I hope I didn't.
Yeah.
Like you can't do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You wouldn't want to try that.
No, don't do that.
I mean, okay, the carapace, which is the fancy name for the shell, right at the top of the shell, they're not in the shell. They are the shell. That's the skin of their back.
Yeah.
And it's made of the same keratin that our nails are made out of, only theirs has nerve endings in it. And it's a similar density to what you would have on your knee. So whatever you feel on your knee is kind of what they're feeling on their shell.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. So for all those people out there, scratch your knee. That's why lots of different tortoise species love to be scratched on their shell, and they love to rub
Yeah.
their shell on things.
Yeah.
Part of the enrichment, if you own a tortoise, like a redfoot or something, would be giving them, brushes
Okay.
they love it. Plenty of YouTube videos of box turtles scratching their butts on like toothbrushes and stuff because it's just so cute.
Yeah.
They actually need that to live, to be able to tell what's going on around them and when
Right.
they're crawling through stuff. It's actually super important that they can
course.
feel. And they need to thermoregulate as well. They're exothermic or cold-blooded, and so they need to heat their blood up using the environment around them. And then when it gets too warm, they need to move to the shade. But they're feeling that sun on their back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you paint them up or do anything to them, it's a big deal. And putting chemicals on them,
No.
not the greatest idea.
Yeah.
So your knowledge around tortoises, but all reptiles, is pretty extensive. So you studied herpetology. So can you tell us a little bit about what I'd really like to know is kind of like your childhood? Was this always something in the back
Yeah.
of your mind that you knew you always related to animals? Was there something that kind of kept coming back to you for you to eventually fall into this animal path?
Yeah. So my childhood, it's kind of like a lot of people's, or most people's, I think, at this point, dogs and cats, lots of dogs and cats. And I was always interested in wildlife and animals. I grew up all over the place, but I'm primarily from New Hampshire.
Okay.
I was born in Massachusetts, but I lived a long part of my childhood in New Hampshire, and I came moving back and forth between Florida and New Hampshire. So I saw diverse wildlife between the different habitats and stuff. And I grew up, a 90s kid. So running around, come back when the streetlights come on, and then inevitably you don't. And so your family's eating dinner without you anyways. Oh, you're back. Hey, what's up? It's very different than nowadays. But
Yes.
so I was out in the woods seeing wildlife and everything. But it wasn't really my career choice originally. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was heavily into music, and then I got into architecture, went to school for architecture, and then didn't use that, although I know what a keystone is.
See, it's a full circle.
Yes, see? I worked my way in very unconventional way into working at a zoo down here, the Palm Beach Zoo. And then from there, fell in love with the wildlife, especially the exotic wildlife. In a different sort of way. And I really dove into wildlife in general and started studying. I mean, when I get into something, I dive into it. So like the podcast, I love the podcast because for me, when I get into photography, 2 years of my life was just while I'm showering, I'm listening to a podcast. While I'm eating, I'm listening to a podcast. While I'm driving, I'm listening to a podcast. While I'm working, I'm not working, I'm listening to a podcast. Like all of this stuff is going on. You know, I'm at the grocery store. I got my AirPods in, listening to a podcast. You know, watching YouTube videos or listening to them in the background. And so I dove heavily into wildlife. And at the zoo, I ended up getting involved in herpetology, and then kind of getting involved in a whole bunch of different sides of the zoo world, including being involved in procedures on jaguar and tigers and you know, non-herp creatures, and ended up working with my buddy at M&J Ecological. Shout out Marcus Andrade. If you know, you know. No, and he got me into venomous reptiles and trying to, you know, get into my class 1 certifications, and then ended up doing research in Peru, which I regularly do now every year with Fund Amazonia and Richard Bodmer, who's Dr. Richard Bodmer is a big name if you look him up, and he's brilliant beyond belief. And it all led me to here. It all led me to wildlife rehabilitation. It's you know who you know, and I knew somebody who was involved at Treasure Coast Wildlife Center, and they just happened to have an opening they hadn't posted about yet, and they told me apply, and I was like, what is that? I've never even heard of them, which is something we're trying to overcome now, because a lot of people say they've never even heard of us.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But so that's how I ended up here. But
cool.
That's awesome. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your time in Peru and kind of how
your travels and stuff.
How you got involved with that originally, and kind of what your yearly trip looks like.
Yeah, so I got involved again unconventionally. I was doing a lot of, I guess, volunteering for a lot of conservation related stuff involved in my zoo that I worked at, that was unrelated to this, but it was involving swallowtail kite research that the zoo partners with ARCI for. And so I was kind of jumping in, and I want to do that too. Come on, guys. And I just happened to be employed by the COO, and he said, sure, you can do this and you can do that. And I kind of put my foot in the door of everything I wanted to do. And so I got to be involved in the Path of the Panther project and film, if anybody knows about that, with National Geographic. And Carlton Ward was running it. And there's some amazing bills that were passed, legislature that was passed that really is helping the panthers in Florida, and all kinds of other species too, kind of that are using this wildlife corridor. But and so all of these things are going on, and I said, I want to do something on my own in, you know, the rainforest. We were doing all this native stuff, which is what I do now. But I was working at a zoo that primarily showed off all of the exotic animals, such as what you guys have. And I was like, I want to go do research down there and learn about these critters that I'm telling guests about, and I know a lot about. I want to really see them in the wild and really see, like, you know, I'm very interested in and very into exotic plants too. So, like, you know, there's all this, if you're into Monstera plants, you know, everybody has their own fancy aeroid mix that they make themselves. And then I go down to the Amazon and see it's like these, you know, obliqua is growing in mud in the dark. And I'm like, I spend I literally have a camera on my plant with a humidity sensor. And if you just don't bother, it grows fine.
Cannot mimic nature.
And so I wanted to get involved in that. So I started doing all these, you know, Earthwatch and all these where you can pay to go out and kind of learn about it. And it's kind of ecotourism kind of thing, you know. And I did one in Peru on the Amazon riverboat kind of thing that Earthwatch does with Richard Bodmer. And I got, you know, fell in love with the staff and everything, the actual biologists that are from there and live in Loreto, Peru. And with the principal investigator, Richard Bodmer. And for whatever reason, he liked me too and said, you can start coming down here without doing that, and you can stay as long as you want, and you can help us with the research. And I said, yes, I will. And I've made it a pact with one of the biologists, Kimmy, if she's listening, because I'm totally going to send the link to this to her. So she's listening,
Excellent.
Kimmy and Paula, that I would be down there every year and never miss a year and be with them. So yeah, there's a lot of biodiversity kind of research. I mean, we study everything down there, and it's all about community-based conservation with the the native people that live down there. I hate to call them like tribal, they're communities. And they actually kind of manage their land, and they were working with Peru to manage their land, if you will, and to kind of prevent some of the measures that were going on to protect the land that was actually harming the wildlife down there and counterproductive to conservation. So it's a long story that Richard Balmer can tell you way better about how it all came about. But suffice to say that our data that's been coming in since the 80s is really helping the community down there get a handle on the land and manage the land correctly to keep the wildlife thriving down there and the plants and everything else. But yeah, we do a lot of research on everything from river dolphins, which I could tell you stories that probably blow your mind, but this isn't a dolphin podcast, all the way up through the animals you guys primarily
we
deal
can
with,
make it a dolphin podcast. We can.
I would love to, or giant river otters, or all kinds of creatures. But yeah, so you had mentioned that, and I'd seen on an earlier podcast of yours when you were talking about conservation, and you had mentioned that, you know, kind of every species props up another species and is super important in the environment in ways you don't really think necessarily about. So I was thinking about it before I came to see you guys, about a story when I first started down there. So we do a lot of transects studies, if you will, in you know, measured locations, very controlled kind of measured locations, but out in the rainforest proper. And we do a lot of studies on parrots, parakeets, macaws, which are, we go out on a boat, we stop at random GPS points along the Amazon River or along the Yarapa, which is a tributary that connects to the Amazon, right? Kind of at the beginning of the Amazon, where kind of all the water comes down from the Andes and forms the Amazon. And we do a lot of these where we're, let's say 6 a.m. we get out, go to these different points, and we'll sit there for a certain amount of time, maybe 15 minutes, maybe it's 5 minutes, and count all of the parrots, parakeets, and macaws that fly over and identify all the species. And, you know, we're kind of seeing how their population is recovering because it's a previously logged forest way back, but it's, you know, it's been logged in the past before all this land management came in, and kind of ravaged by hunters and such. And, you know, all of that is now, that area is really under the Kokama and Najua people's kind of management. But we also do transects through the rainforest, where my first time out, we walked into the rainforest. I mean, we got off this, it's just, you live on like these skiffs, or they call them skiffs, but they're not skiffs like when you look up the word skiff. They're basically just really old canoes. They say that they're church canoes or religious canoes because they're holy. And yeah, they do. They do have a lot of leaks.
Oh, that's funny.
But you get off these boats and you climb up the mud. It's the flooded forest, and we're studying, when I'm there, they study all year round, but when I'm there, it's primarily during the drier season. So the forest is walkable. And so actually you're climbing up 10, 15, 20 feet to get to the forest from the Yarapa or the Amazon. It's just a wall of mud. And as soon as we got into the trees, like you could still see the water behind us, we were surrounded by a troop of squirrel monkeys, and they are just everywhere out there, prolific. And we're surrounded by squirrel monkeys, and they're squeaking and jumping and running, and they're just looking at us like whatever, you know. They're not concerned about us at all. They're just living their monkey life. And they're running through, and they're grabbing all these fruit, the aguaje, the coconas, all this stuff that's really hard to kind of get into, and it's not super easy for parrots and such to get into, but they're just tearing it apart. There's fruit out there from the punga tree that literally explode, and like this little dandelion fluff kind of stuff comes out, and the seeds go off on the breeze, but they literally explode when you're messing with them. So
Oh my gosh.
the squirrel monkeys are out there, and then they kind of just they start tearing stuff off, and they eat a little bit from each tree, and then they're just dropping the fruit, and then you see them all just take off. They're just going on their way, and here come mono negro, black capuchins. All right, monkeys come over, and they're taking what's left of this fruit, and they're eating kind of the meat of the fruit, and then they're dropping what's left there that they're not interested in on the ground. And then all of a sudden you see some blue and gold macaws flying in,
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
usually
Goosebumps. You
a
keep giving
pair.
me goosebumps.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, a pair, and they come in and they're eating what's left, and they're taking the seeds and stuff too,
Wow.
and then they're flying off, and they poop every 20 minutes, so they're kind of reforesting. They're pooping out the seeds with their own fertilizer.
there you go.
But I saw that again. The rest of the biologists that not phased. This is just normal.
Right.
I was blown away watching
Yeah.
them kind of follow, and so you'll hear this kind of paw, paw, paw sound off in the distance, this kind of hollow thunking in the woods, in the rainforest, and it's usually capuchin monkeys or titi monkeys sometimes, or howler monkeys. It's those mid-sized primates that are smacking really hard fruit out there that have shells kind of like coconuts, but it's fruit, and they're smacking them against the trees trying to crack them open, and you'll see blue and golds kind of watching from the top of these huge capirona trees and stuff, and then they'll fly over as soon as you hear those primates wandering off somewhere else. They'll fly over and start taking
Oh
what's
my
there.
gosh.
So that's really
That's
cool.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Everything is connected.
everything is connected. So
I think
a lot of the research has informed some of the people that were living out there. They were growing aguaje trees, which are like palm trees. They're very, very tall in the rainforest because there's no sun in the rainforest. It's pitch black in there. The canopy is thick, so these have to grow real tall to get through the trees, the rest of the canopy, and get their sunlight and start fruiting. And aguaje is very popular down there, and they make aguaje ice cream and all this stuff. So people living out there were growing these trees and trying to sell them at market in Iquitos, which is basically a jungle city, a very, very large, sprawling city in the middle of the jungle. You can only reach by plane. And it's literally an island because really it's surrounded by these 3 rivers. So it's an island in the jungle where you can't really get to unless you're on a plane. And so they're selling at this huge market. It's the largest market in all of South America. And they were growing these trees and going up through the canopy. So how do you get the fruit to sell it at market? Well, they can't. There's no ladder that's going to get up there. So they were cutting down the trees, which crushed half the fruit,
Yeah.
and when it fell, and then also it would open up the canopy a little bit for walking trees, which if you don't know what those are, look them up.
They look-
It's
yeah.
insane. Yeah, it's
I've
incredible.
heard.
But it was not great because also the primates that eat and all the other animals that
Right.
eat this fruit are not getting them, and it's knocking down other trees with fruit and stuff. So
Mhm.
and not a lot that's grown out there is edible. Most things don't want you to eat it, so
Yeah.
it's poisonous or spiky. Everything has thorns, like
Yep.
bad thorns, not like you see on a rose
That little
bush,
rose,
but
yeah.
I'm talking about like nails,
Yeah. Yeah.
and stuff. So it's tough enough for them to make a living out there. So our research was kind of showing them that they can grow these aguaje trees along the banks, and they're getting sun, so they don't have to grow as tall, and they're maybe 20 feet, 30 feet tall, and you can get a ladder out there and just pull the fruit and sell it, and use it for your community and stuff. And then they're leaving portions for the primates. They'll leave a quarter to a half of it
Oh my gosh.
just for the rest
Yeah.
of the wilderness to take.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's so important because I think so many conservation efforts are kind of creating this holistic approach where, yes, you do have to do the on the ground studies and you have to do the counts and you have to evaluate like animal activity and populations.
Hmm.
But so much of what's going to really lead to your long-term success is going to be working with the community.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
you're like literally combining what you're doing
Yep.
in Peru, in the Amazon with these incredible species. And it's got
And
so
incredible
much.
humans.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
probably some of the smartest people I've ever met out there.
I know it's
You
so
know, they're
Yeah.
living in stilted shacks and sheds in the Amazon, and they're probably the most scientifically minded humans I've ever met.
yeah.
So it's amazing
Yeah. That's
the
awesome.
combination of boots on the ground, science, and also keep in mind, you know, tying everything together, what we do here with the native wildlife versus what we're studying and with you guys with the exotics and what
Mhm.
I'm studying down in Peru and everything
Yeah.
is a lot of our wildlife goes back and forth.
Yeah.
Hundreds of species of birds come through Florida or come from Florida and go to South America and back.
Yeah.
I know that's
So it's
so as
crazy.
a birder, like coming down to Florida is awesome
Yeah.
because the summer birds that I'm like, you know, I've got to get out there to go see because I'm gonna miss it because they're there for like a week.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, yes, you know,
Yeah.
they're
No, there are
they're
places
here.
here you would love. Wakota is one place, and Green Cay, which are in Palm Beach County. If you guys look them up, Wakota is a little hard to spell, but if you look them up, and right around this time, all these species are nesting. And so literally, I think at Cotahatchee, you can see over 128 species regularly
Wow.
right there on, it's like boardwalks over
Oh
this
my
kind of man-made
gosh.
wetland that was it's part of the water utilities kind of property. And so it's just a swamp, wetland, basically. And you go out there on these boardwalks and like hundreds of species that you know, normally wouldn't see. Some that you don't see, like the Wilson snipes that are great at hiding,
Oh my
and
gosh.
the Chuck Will's widows, and all these
Yes.
great, you know, the night jars and stuff, all the way up to like just great blue herons and sandhill
Yeah.
cranes and stuff.
hmm
So
That's
cool.
amazing. And just like the whole how everything connected is like that conversation is people sometimes think, yeah, everything's connected in the neighborhood, you know. But going off your
In
point,
the
like
world.
this is transcontinental, like especially with
Yeah.
birds.
Yeah.
Well, only with birds, really. On a terrestrial sense, like these are across
Or sea
huge,
turtles.
huge, right, terrestrial, semi-terrestrial. Anyways, you get what I'm saying is like
Yeah.
the little things you do in your backyard can literally affect
Yeah.
Peru.
and what your backyard is. So a lot of people, I mean, pollinators are a hot topic, and save the butterflies, save the bees, but doing a little bit more research and knowing how to do that kind of stuff. So a great fun project I did with my kids is to build a butterfly garden.
Oh yeah.
And so
Oh.
people think of, the monarchs, and they're going to use all the milkweed. And so people know to buy milkweed and plant it in their yards.
Yeah.
But knowing the exact right milkweed
Yeah.
helps, because having longleaf milkweed that's the right species versus the wrong, the monarchs are going to use both. But because of the way the plant's cycles go, the monarch should be leaving at a certain time to migrate. And if you give them the wrong one, they just stay and then they die. And that's
Yeah.
like knowing. So yeah, this simple act of trying to help and not really doing a whole lot of research is a preliminary Google research that leads you to, home, like something to buy at Home Depot or a plant store or
Yeah.
something.
Right.
But knowing which one to get, because they all
Exactly.
look the same sometimes, can make a huge difference for something like
Wow,
those
yeah.
butterflies, which, affect plants, that affect other animals, and so
Oh,
on
yeah.
and so forth. And yeah, so what you do in your backyard literally affects the whole world.
Yeah. Education is conservation.
It is.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about what I just said, and I feel absolutely terrible. With all the birds, it's only birds. It's not only birds. I didn't mean to say that.
I just had to tease you
insects
a
and all
little
the-
bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
lots of things migrate, and
All I think about is birds.
yeah. Right?
I'm just kidding.
That's
No.
Lately, me too.
But yeah, I mean that's fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
Plus, it's like easy, your backyard stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
also fun because you have to do this research in order to do it. I don't want to say do it correctly, but like you know what I'm trying to say. But it really just it creates a whole picture.
You get to learn a lot more and then impress your friends with how smart you are
Exactly.
too. I mean, there's
Exactly.
that.
There you go.
I use words like plumicorn
Yeah.
instead of feather tufts. And I say, water snake, I might say Nerodia taxispolata because it sounds fancy.
There you go.
It's a brown water snake. But yeah, it allows you to feel good too about yourself.
Yeah.
But it's important to know how you're designing your yards if
Yep.
you're living in a single family home where you can design your yards. And keeping native plants and native wildlife around. So
Yep.
you don't have to throw rat poison out and try to get rid of the rodents if you have a hawk nearby. But if you want to make sure you have the right landscape to let, I mean, hawks are pretty generalistic. They love living everywhere, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe learning about the different snakes in your area so you're not messing with the wrong ones, but
Right.
at the same time, you're not terrified of them.
Right.
And you kind of, the more you learn, the less scared you are of
Yeah.
those animals. And those are great pest control. Plus you get really cool, pictures of what's in your
The stories,
backyard
yeah,
and interesting
exactly.
stories of
I
what
know.
you've seen. It can be really fun. And there's plenty of, I think Florida's native plants are very pretty. So you can end up with some really pretty landscapes, just not the standard sod grass that you find everywhere.
I
So,
know.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think like that was a phenomenal example. I think one of the things I was curious about is what's something that's very tangible that somebody could do to help benefit wildlife. So we talked about the rat poison and being aware of like the vehicle accidents and having an
Yeah.
awareness. But like, is there something that you really would like that you constantly remind people about or something you want people to know, especially as we're going into baby season, something that people should be aware of? Because I think that we have a lot of similarities in Chicagoland with having the migratory route. This is the bulk of baby season hits right now.
Yep.
We get even phone calls at Parrot Stars seeking assistance with what do I do
Yep.
with this bird that
Yeah.
just hit my window or this
Yeah.
baby bird
Yep.
that fell out of its nest.
Migration's starting. We got to get back up there.
Or that's why you're here on
Oh, that's
vacation,
true.
maybe? I don't know.
Follow them up. Yeah, what do you think? What's a great
You are a
thing?
birder.
Yeah.
He's really talented. Oh my God. He blows me out of the water. I think I have a somewhat above average knowledge, and he is just
I'm pretty sure
all
you guys
day
both have
correcting
above
me.
average knowledge.
With parrots,
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty darn good with parrots. But my God, songbirds, it's
You
constant.
know him well, huh?
So I worked at the Ohio State Biological Museum, and I worked with a lot of like actual specimens. So I mean, Alexis and Julia knows because they listened to me talk about it multiple times on this podcast. But the birds I started working with were all dead. I mean, because they're specimens. But that's how I really got the diversity aspect, because I worked with so many amazing specimens that were in the
Makes sense.
inventories, and actually was taught and helped prepare all of them. So not only did I like
Oh.
identify, I was able to
Mhm.
like understand the actual function
The
and how
working
things, and
me-
then
yeah.
preparing them for lifelong inventory use. And so that's, I mean, it's just an
Got a
amazing
working
experience.
knowledge
But
of the-
that's really where it kind of like
So you're on the other side of things. So we actually send some of the animals that come to us that didn't make it up to the Natural History Museum.
Oh, wow.
yeah.
The Smithsonian. So they actually asked for us to send. We have a whole list of what they would like, and so we send them up there to be prepared
Wow.
and
Yeah.
displayed and everything. So that's pretty cool. I never met someone on the other side of that. So
it's amazing. I mean, there's always a weird smell, but
I bet there is.
It's
In the industry we work in, there's always a weird smell.
well, that's true on
anyways.
both
That's
sides, on
true.
every
You
side,
know.
on every side.
Yeah.
But it's a unique smell thing.
That sounds funny because like people are like, I want to work with my animals when I'm older, and I'm like, okay, it's not always the most glamorous.
People used to
job.
ask me at the zoo, "What's it like working with all these cool animals?" And I'm like, "It's a lot of yard work. You use hoses most of the day.
it's-
You wash a lot.
Do you
of
like
dishes.
scrubbing? Yeah. Do you like
Yeah.
scrubbing and cutting fruit?
Yeah,
It's a lot of that.
a lot of
yeah.
poop,
Oh
a
my
lot
gosh.
of poop.
A lot of poop and a lot of fish, and yeah.
That's what it's all about, though.
So
But
yeah, I love
I
it.
think it does pay off because you have all of those hours of that labor.
Mm,
And I think those 5 minutes you do get with the animals for every however many hours you get to have to pay to do that five
Yeah.
minutes,
yeah, yeah.
it makes it worth it. It
Oh,
really
100%,
does.
I do like
100%.
it.
It's kind of fun.
But
Yeah.
It's kind
I
of
didn't
fun.
want to take away from what Alexis originally asked. Is
Yes.
we were talking
So
about what are like just some things like that you can change,
yeah,
especially going into this season that we're talking about, just to bring it back that
yeah.
you want to aware
So
people.
baby season is upon us. We get a lot of calls from people who ask a very similar question, which is, um, found a baby bird. And I don't know what kind of bird it is. It doesn't even have feathers yet, or it's only got a few feathers, and it's on the ground. What do I do? It depends on the situation. If you see that there's an injury to it that's obvious, it's bleeding, its wings backwards, something crazy, bring it to us, please, or bring it to wherever you are in the world here, to your local wildlife rehab, to be taken care of. However, birds like that, they fledge this time of year. They will fall out of the nest. They're trying to fly. Maybe somebody pushed them out of the nest. They got a lot
Mm-hmm.
of siblings, but they will end up on the ground. So look to see if there's a nest and an active nest with
Mm-hmm.
things coming and going. If so, you can let them be on the ground. Mama will continue to feed them
Mm-hmm.
and coming back and forth, and she will take good care of them. If you see the nest is gone and there's no more mama, and maybe some yard work happened and somebody was trimming a tree and it's destroyed the nest, bring them to your local wildlife rehab because there may
Yeah.
not be a mama. But if there's a mama and she might be staying far away from you
Right.
because she's nervous, let them be. Maybe move them to the shade because people get worried. They're in the sun. Okay, put them in the shade
Mm-hmm.
under that same tree. The sun's going to move. The shade's going to
Yeah.
move. But let them be. And let mama do what she does best. And if you're worried about cats and dogs, and I have stray cats in the area. I mean, yeah, a cat can climb a tree, but
Mm-hmm.
I have stray cats in the area. My dog needs to use the backyard. What do? I can't keep my dog from, I
Mm-hmm.
can't take him on a walk. I let them use the backyard, that sort of thing. Then there's multiple things you can do. You can try and get them into a nice basket or shoebox, and get them up in the tree that their nest is in, and mama
Mm-hmm.
will take care of them there, and now your dog's not messing with them. Or putting something around them to
Mm-hmm.
prevent the dog or the cat from getting through, but that's small enough, but large enough for the mama to get through,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, if you're not sure what you're doing, reach out to a wildlife rehab. Actually, before you do anything, reach out to wildlife
Yep.
rehab. Call us. We love to hear from you. We love to, check on the situation and give you
Mm-hmm.
the right info. It's different every time
Yep.
because every situation's different and every species is different
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth. That's a big one. And similar for bunnies. People find a lot of bunnies.
Mm-hmm. The bunnies were like the hardest part, in my opinion, of my time at the wildlife center
Mm,
because they are so incredibly fragile. But I don't think people really understand or realize that they leave their nest when they're still quite small.
yeah.
So
Yep.
it is something really
A
important to be
baby bunny
aware of.
isn't always a baby.
Yes. They might
Yeah.
have left because it was the appropriate
You
time
see
to
that
leave.
with raccoons too.
Yeah.
Baby raccoon is out on his own doing his thing now, very precocious,
Mhm.
and they're like, he's small, he must be a baby. But yeah, there's that side of it. We also get a lot of, I didn't understand this before I started working wildlife rehab, but
Mhm.
there's baby bunnies are usually left alone by the mama during the day. So people come outside and they find,
Oh, okay.
sometimes mama has a nice little burrow that she left the babies in, or sometimes it's under your flipped over canoe in your backyard or in a bush somewhere. They don't always make the greatest decisions on
Yeah.
how to hide their babies. So you'll walk outside and see a little baby bunny,
Yeah.
might not even have its eyes open, that
Mhm.
sort of thing. And when you see that, you don't see a mama and you get nervous. And so we get a lot of calls and a lot of people bringing them into us. The moms will come out to feed a couple of times a night in the middle of the night under cover of darkness, cloak and dagger
Mhm.
style. You got to remember, bunnies, I mean, they can bite you and it will hurt, but bunnies don't really have, lagomorphs in general, don't have much in the way of defense, and they're kind of everybody's food. So mama doesn't
Mhm.
want to bring the predators that are following her big bunny person back to the nest, if you will, to the
Yeah.
burrow. They don't want to bring predators back to their babies. So during the day, they tend to stay away. They might be looking from far
Yeah.
away and keeping an eye on them. But if you don't see the mama, that doesn't mean that they're in distress. That's normal. So it's really a case by case situation because unfortunately, with the amount of wild cats, domesticated cats that are out and about in North America, lots of them are being grabbed by
Mhm.
cats that really
Yeah.
aren't supposed to be there. So there is that. If they look injured, that might be a different story. But at first glance, you see a baby and no mama. That's normal. That's okay.
Okay.
And so, maybe keep an eye on them, but don't go near them because that keeps mama away. And if you're standing out there at night to see if mama came, mama's not coming because she's,
'Cause,
nervous. There's a
the
big
thing
scary
we
predator there.
yes, I was just gonna say the thing we preach all day long on this podcast is we are predators, and we sometimes forget that, but everything about our human
Yeah.
Our forward
appearance,
facing eyes and
yes,
everything. Yeah.
we are out to kill in their
We're
point of
primates.
view. So,
Yep.
yes,
Yep.
you sometimes forget that you have to take yourself out of the situation. Yes, you're a kind-hearted human, you would never hurt the animal, but that's not what they're seeing or experiencing on their end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, all right, so what's like the future of Treasure Coast Wildlife Center? So, do you guys have anything in the works? What's kind of the plan in place?
So yeah, we're trying to grow and we have been growing since I've started there 2 years ago. So much development
Yeah.
has happened and we're growing leaps and bounds right now. But one of the things that happened that was on the negative side, and we're now trying to make a positive, we were building a wildlife center that was, I know we're a wildlife center, but was more of a public facing center that would have lots of your standard nature center kind of education. It would be a
Mhm.
great place for our education department to really build. And it has kind of a zoo component to it as well,
Mhm.
with boardwalks and pathways that would lead to outdoor enclosures with all of our permanent residents. Right now, our permanent residents are on display around the outside of our wildlife hospital, and we'd like to take all of those enclosures in that area and just devote it to wildlife rehab
Yeah.
Wow, yeah.
because the process doesn't stop just at the hospital. There's a lot more before,
transition.
we
Mhm.
don't heal them and then just put them out into the wild. We need to make sure that
Yeah.
they know how to make a living again and how to be the wild animal that they were before we got them. So all of these permanent residents and education ambassador animals and stuff, we're all going over there and we're going to have this amazing facility. So we started with a very large steel Butler building. It's kind of like a rounded shaped building for those who are listening. Butler building. It's kind of like half a tube.
Okay.
And we were in the process of building this. I mean, it was 30 plus feet high or tall building. We already had a foundation. We had the building half built. When unfortunately Hurricane Milton came through in October last year, 2024, and sent some tornadoes through our
Yeah.
way. And so the building was fine with the hurricane, but the tornadoes, one came between us and Furry Friends, which is a big dog ranch rescue facility right next door. Luckily, all the dogs weren't there. And of course, none of our animals were on that side of our property
Right.
because they were all bunkered down in a hurricane safe building.
Yeah.
But this tornado came through and went up the easement between us and sent our building into the trees.
Oh no.
So it's a twisted steel wreck in the trees right now.
Mhm.
It's very impressive to look at, but it's a shame. So we are working towards gaining funding to start that project again. From my knowledge, this has been a 50-year dream that just
Wow.
recently started to come into fruition, and just the wrong time.
One day.
Yeah,
Yep.
just the wrong
That's all it
timing.
takes.
So the goal is to get that back and get that going, and hopefully getting some funding in to help with that. It's a very pricey project, as you can imagine, and
Yeah.
we are still very grassroots. But I think it's really important to really build our education department there to really, help the generation that's coming up, kind of,
Yeah.
teach these lessons and kind of do something out there in our native habitat that
Yeah.
protects everything. But aside from that, we're also doing we're starting to kind of look at building a lot of more events on our property, more educational. I mean, we have a very large property of just wilderness, so we like to have a lot more speaking events, a lot more maybe using some of the woods for trails,
Yeah.
to really
Yeah.
bring people out, master
Mhm.
naturalist programs, that sort of thing. Nothing concrete now, but we're really starting to work towards that and really get the
Wow.
community
That'd be great.
back into nature
Yep.
and understanding nature.
Yeah, I think it's, well, two things. I'll circle back to what happened with the hurricane, but I think
Mhm.
just what you just mentioned, this is an area of Florida, Martin County specifically, that is growing residentially very, very rapidly. So it's changed what was kind of a very agricultural and native habitat kind of combination of the two to having a
Yeah.
lot more residential pressure. And I think this is the perfect time to really encourage people to support organizations like yours, because these two things have to go hand in hand. You can't
Yeah.
have the growth in the residential component of this area and not focus on the native side too.
Yeah.
It has to be a balance. And I think if we're able to get the education out there and get people involved and passionate, especially at a young age, and
Yeah.
really encourage them to take into consideration and have them make choices that are going to serve them as a person, but then also serve the environment around them, it's like incredibly important. And I think
Yep.
you're just set in such a great position physically, like where you're located, that
Yep.
hopefully the community that's growing so rapidly here continues to support you guys. And for us, I know I would love to give people an opportunity to donate. I didn't see firsthand, like physically, but I saw that day on Facebook what
Mhm.
you guys were posting of
Yeah.
how that tornado
Yeah.
ripped through that building. And
Yeah.
I think we can probably post a link or maybe share a video so people can
Yep.
really get some imagery of the extensiveness of the damage, because
Yeah.
it's considerable. And we're in Florida, and yes, you have incredible hurricane precautions that you take to protect the animals, but we are at the mercy of Mother Nature, and
Yep.
our listeners and our followers know that because they followed our stories of how we have to take the precautions here for the hurricane prep. But what you can't necessarily prep for is a tornado.
Yeah.
You don't know where it's going to hit. You can watch the hurricane, you can estimate what the winds are going to be, but a tornado is totally unpredictable, and that's what hit you guys, and the damage is quite extensive. So, I think, I mean, you can tell us what's the best way for people to donate. Is it through your website, or
Yeah.
or we could add the GoFundMe to the links on this podcast episode?
Yeah, I'll give you the links. It's a little arbitrary what the GoFundMe link
Yes.
that was given to us is. So
But
off
if
the top
people
of my head, I
searched-
couldn't say it. But if you look up Treasure Coast Wildlife Center on GoFundMe, you'll
Okay,
find
perfect.
it.
Definitely.
Also, yeah, through our website at treasurecoastwildlifecenter.org, you can donate there, and that's even easier for us to deal with and handle. Or coming out to see us, you can come out and visit us
Yeah.
Thursdays through Sunday,
Yeah.
11 to 3. It's free to come out. It's $10 a head to take a tour.
Yeah.
But you can come out and do your own tour and donate as well there. Pretty
Excellent.
much every way you could imagine, from QR codes for PayPal and all that, which is on our website, and all the way through cash and all that. But anything helps.
Yeah.
Definitely visit our website though, and
Yeah, your
Yeah.
website's phenomenal. I think if people want to kind of deep dive into your organization, that might be a great place to start doing
Yes.
it. And if you want to get involved with wildlife, I mean, if you aren't in this direct location in Florida, look up your local wildlife center, see how you can
Yeah.
support them. But for all of you listening, all of our loyal followers and listeners, I can tell you firsthand, we went to the facility,
Yeah.
we saw it. It's definitely worth the donation, and if you're going to make a donation to an organization, you want to know that your money's going to
Right.
the animals. And I can pretty much guarantee like this is going to the betterment of wildlife and this natural habitat. And you are a 501c3, so people, it's a legit place to donate your money.
We're real. We're real. Please help us.
I know.
And if you're not
So-
near us, help your local wildlife.
Yeah,
You can't
absolutely.
make 3,000 releases without public support.
Yes.
We
which
can't.
is-
Yeah, we rely heavily
I mean,
on
that number
volunteers
is staggering.
too. So
Yes.
And that's what I was going to ask. I know, obviously, getting involved via donations and just visiting is crucial, but is there a way that people can actually get involved physically with,
yeah, reach out to us.
Wildlife
We
Center.
we do rely a lot on volunteer help.
Mhm.
There's, as you can imagine, it's a lot of cleaning, but it's a lot of fun cleaning. I mean,
Yep.
you get to clean standing in an enclosure with an
right there
eagle.
next to them?
Like that's pretty cool. But there's a lot of cleaning, but it's
Mhm.
it really helps us to be able to spend a lot of our time working on the medical side of things and
Right.
and really
Mhm.
helping the animals coming in. So we love. I believe we're at this point it's 16 and older, but we'd love to have people come out. There is a process to learning what you're doing because it's not exactly a zoo and you're working around a lot of animals that have disabilities and issues. And at some point you might be cleaning around a lot of animals that are being rehabbed as well. So there's a lot of different things you need to learn.
Yeah.
Right.
But we're here to teach you that, and it's a really fun process. But yeah, definitely reach out to us. Go to our website and reach out to us via phone, via email is even better, so we can kind of get back to you. Come on out and visit us and ask us about it, and we'll get you signed up. But yeah, and there's a lot of non-cleaning things too. We do events, we do outreach programs, which we, at some point will be relying heavily and do sometimes rely heavily on volunteers with. So while the rest of the world is paving the environment, we're trying to be saving the environment. I had to throw that in there. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
guys.
That's awesome.
Go for it all day
Don't
long.
pave.
I want to hear
Don't
this every day of
pave
my life.
Nature, save nature. I have to say it.
Yeah.
But you guys could be part of saving what everyone else is paving.
Wow.
I gotta write that in the notes.
It's a cool catchphrase.
Yeah,
guys
we're gonna give you
can
the quote.
totally steal that.
Yeah.
I totally stole that from someone else at my work.
Oh.
So you could totally
Okay,
use
well,
that.
we'll give the credit to the Wildlife Center. Well, I am so grateful. Is there any other questions that you have off the top of your head?
No, I mean, that's a lot of good stuff. Amazing animal work,
This has
conservation
been,
work.
yes, beyond what I
A
could have
great
ever imagined.
New perspective, because obviously we talk about, parrots in captivity a lot. And so getting that wild aspect is really awesome and refreshing. Yeah.
It is, yeah. And it's just us individually are very we really want to combine these two things. But I think
So
a
do we.
lot of our listeners, they really are passionate too, and they really do care. And they're the people that I think are going to be the ones that are going to go out there and share what they've learned on this podcast episode and hopefully do some good. So thank you to all the listeners too.
Thank you to everybody.
Yeah.
It
But-
takes everybody's effort.
It does, for
Yeah.
sure. But Mike, my goodness, I can't even begin to thank you enough for being so generous with your time and your willingness to participate.
Cool.
And I am so excited to start a friendship with you because I'm going to make you be my friend because you're
Make
super,
me. You guys are great.
you're super interesting, and I'd love to learn more from you. It's been awesome
Same here.
I
getting
know,
to
I s-
know you.
Yeah, I speak on behalf of both of us, I think. Where can we sign up for everything that you do?
No, right? We're like, how do we do our life?
How do we go to
50-50 in
Peru
Florida?
every year? And
You
Right?
should totally come with me down to Peru
Stop, because I have
and do some of the research, both of you.
I have this yes man
We can
mentality.
make it happen.
Like
We
the
can make it
movie.
happen.
yeah,
And then you guys can film it.
I'll say yes.
There you
It's better
go.
to what is that? It's better to apologize later than
Ask for-
than-
Ask for
it's-
forgiveness.
Yeah, so-
It's better to apologize. Sorry, guys.
It's better to ask for
For
forgiveness
forgiveness.
than
Than
for
permission.
permission.
There, that's a better way.
That's
to say
how I
it.
made my entire career is asking for forgiveness because
Right.
I've done what I thought we needed to do.
There you
So,
go.
yeah.
Hey, got to do what you got to do.
Well, that's
but-
fantastic.
All right. So everyone, Treasure Coast Wildlife Center, Mike Rodgers was with us here today. Thank you again so much.
Thank you for
And
having me.
then for our regular listeners, we're just going to throw in there Our little catchphrase. All
As always, be kind to your parrot and it will be kind to you.
right. Thanks,
Excellent.
everyone.
Thanks.